Good evening. Today is February 10th, 2026. I hope everybody has had a good day. I want to talk tonight about 1976 Revisited. It's been 50 years since 1976, the bicentennial year of the United States. So this year we're celebrating 250 years as a nation. Perhaps at a later time I'll do a video about that. On January 27th of 1976, the United States vetoed a United Nations resolution that called for an independent Palestinian state. That's interesting that was exactly 3 years after the signing of the peace treaty ending the Vietnam War. On March 31st, the New Jersey Supreme Court ruled that comatose patient Karen Ann Quinlan could be disconnected from the ventilator. She remained comatose until her death in 1985. On May 11th, U.S. President Gerald Ford signed the Federal Election Campaign Act. On July 2nd, North Vietnam dissolved the Provisional Government of South Vietnam, united the two countries to form the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. On July 2nd, in Gregg versus Georgia, the Supreme Court of the United States upheld the revived capital punishment statutes enacted in response to the 1972 decision, Furman versus Georgia, and thus gave the green light to the resumption of executions. That was just 2 days before the bicentennial. Texas would not actually carry out an execution for another 6 years, with the execution of Charlie Brooks Jr. on December 7th, 1982, and I did a video about that a few years ago. On July 4th, from coast to coast, the United States celebrated the bicentennial, the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. I remember I was living in Teague, Texas at the time, and I was recruited to be involved in bicentennial celebrations. They had events at the city park. If I remember correctly, it was Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And I played my guitar and sung Jimmy Crack Corn and Blowing in the Wind. And on July 12th, Houston Congresswoman Barbara Jordan gave the keynote speech at the Democratic National Convention in New York City, the first African American ever to do so. On July 15th, Jimmy Carter received the Democratic presidential nomination. And on July 27th, delegates attending the American Legion Convention in the Bellevue Stratford Hotel in Philadelphia began falling ill with a form of pneumonia, marking the first outbreak of what became known as Legionnaire's disease. On July 29th, in New York City, David Richard Berkowitz, better known as Son of Sam, began a series of attacks that would terrorize the city for the next year. On August 19th, President Ford turned back a challenge from Ronald Reagan to win the Republican presidential nomination in Kansas City. And to be honest, I was very relieved when that happened. I was not then, nor am I now, a Republican. But of the two candidates, Ford was the more preferable of the two. On September 24th, Patty Hearst was sentenced to 7 years in prison for her role in a 1974 bank robbery by the Symbionese Liberation Army, the SLA. On August 25th, Clarence Norris, the last survivor of the Scottsboro Boys, was pardoned by Alabama Governor George Wallace, who in the past had been known as a diehard segregationist, but who eventually renounced his former positions. In 1974, while taking a Black History course at Baylor, I read Dr. Dan Carter's book, Scottsboro, A Tragedy of the American South. And I believe it was in 1991 when I was in the PhD program at Baylor. I got to hear uh, Dr. Carter lecture, and he autographed my copy of his book, Scottsboro, A Tragedy of the American South. And I later saw the TV movie Judge Horton and the Scottsboro Boys. On November 2nd, Jimmy Carter defeated Gerald Ford, becoming the first candidate from the Deep South to win the White House since the Civil War. On December 1st, Jose Lopez Portillo took office as president of Mexico. Again, in 1976, I was living in Teague, Texas. I was a social worker for the aged, blind, and disabled for the Texas Department of Public Welfare, now known as Health and Human Services. I served as president of the Parents Organization for Exceptional Children, an organization dedicated to raising money for the support of a local sheltered workshop and sending children to Baylor for speech therapy. And I was also a member of the Teague Rotary Club. And throughout my life, I've always stayed busy. At the time, I was completing my thesis on the Nation of Islam, Belief and Practice in Light of the American Constitutional Principle of Religious Liberty, for my MA degree in Church State Studies at Baylor. And I also did a lot of preaching that year. I preached, there's not been a year in my life before or since 1976 that I preached at as many different churches as I did. I preached, and all of them were AME, African Methodist Episcopal. I had joined the denomination the previous year. And in 1976, I traveled to Oakwood, Palestine, Alto, Mahia, Corsicana, Winkler, Athens, Denison, Waco, Temple, Belton, Bastrop, Burnett, Austin, San Marcos, New Braunfels, and San Antonio to deliver sermons. I also participated in a number of Masonic activities related to Blue Lodge, Scottish Rite, and Shrine. On January the 20th, I attended a very interesting workshop on dealing with powerlessness in today's society on the campus of Southwest Texas State University in San Marcos. At various times during the year, I attended a number of other training events related to my job. I made a number of trips to Waco to do research in the Baylor Library and to meet with my thesis director, Dr. James Leo Garrett, who remained a good friend until his death in 2020 at the age of 94. On April 29th, I spoke at the Church State Seminar in Baylor's Tibble Bible Building regarding my thesis. This session had been postponed from an earlier time that day to a speech by President Ford at Waco Hall next door. I was honored to shake hands with the President of the United States and hear his speech. On May 14th, I had breakfast with Dr. Garrett at a local restaurant prior to going to the Heart of Texas Coliseum for Baylor's commencement ceremony, in which I received my Master of Arts degree in Church State Studies. Throughout 1976, there was much talk again about the bicentennial, and I participated. And then on the day itself, July 4th, a Sunday, I preached at Wayman Chapel, AME Church and Temple. Preaching at various churches is a positive experience, but it's not enough if one feels called to the pastoral ministry. I joined the AME Church in 1975 and had been ordained at the Central Texas Conference. However, I was greatly disappointed when I did not receive a pastoral appointment. The late Reverend T.R. Hartwell, a wonderful man, served as conference secretary at the time of my admission. I preached for him during his pastorate at Metropolitan AME Church in Austin In 1976, he was appointed as presiding elder of the South Dallas District of the North Texas Conference. Reverend Hartwell told Bishop John Hurst Adams they wanted me on his district. Then on September 5th, I was sent to supply at Emmanuel AME Church, 2627 South Marsalis. That's in the South Oak Cliff section of Dallas. And, excuse me, sneezes are involuntary. When one starts, you can't stop it. But that church is not there anymore. The building still stands. It's another congregation meeting there. On October 8th, oh, I'm sorry. On October 8th, at the North Texas Conference in Fort Worth, I was officially appointed as pastor of Emmanuel. During the fall of '76, I visited a client at the Fairfield Memorial Hospital. While there, I checked the census, and I wanted to see if there was anyone else I might visit while I was there. Found the name of Deborah Bass, a nurse at Fairview Manor Nursing Center, whom I had met shortly after arriving in Teague 2 years earlier, but whom I did not know well. During the next few weeks, I had a number of visits with Deborah. After her discharge, she called me to thank me for my visit. A day or two later, I called her back and asked her to have dinner with me. She accepted. On October 21st, we had our first date at Winkler's Restaurant, which is now Ponte's Diner, in Fairfield. And during the next few months, we spent much time together. On December 25th, I proposed marriage, and she accepted. Then on February 19th, 1977, we were married at Fairfield Baptist Church by the late Reverend W.M. Johnson. The year 1976 was truly an eventful year, marked by a master's degree, a pastoral appointment, and an engagement. Oh boy. The year 1977 will be marked by getting married and moving to Dallas, where Deborah and I will begin another chapter in our lives. Have a good evening.